Welcome back to the Other Side of 45 podcast. I'm your host, Randy Black. This podcast is about taking chances, owning my mistakes, addressing generational family trauma and curses, completing my 50/50s by 50 list, and my life as a single empty nester. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Please subscribe and rate this podcast 5 stars. In this episode, I'm going to talk about my own personal mental health issues since it is BIPOC Mental Health Month, which was formerly known as Bebe Campbell's National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. You may not have heard of Bebe Campbell, neither have I, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Bebe Campbell was an American author, journalist, teacher, and mental health advocate. Bebe Campbell struggled to support her daughter who battled with mental health illness and a system that prevented her daughter from getting help and support. She founded NAMI Inglewood in a predominantly Black neighborhood to create a space that was safe for Black people to talk about mental health concerns. Throughout her time as an advocate, Campbell made her way to D.C. On June 2nd, 2008, Congress formally recognized Bebe Campbell National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month to bring awareness to the unique struggles that underrepresented groups face regarding mental illness in the U.S. Ms. Campbell is the mother of Maya Campbell, the actress from the sitcom in the 90s, In the House with LL Cool J. She played the daughter of Jackie Warren, played by Debbie Allen. Bebe Campbell's daughter, Maya Campbell, has struggled with bipolar disorder. This year, Mental Health America's theme for BIPOC Mental Health Month is #Beyond the Numbers. So, what is Mental Health America? Well, it's the nation's leading community-based nonprofit dedicated to addressing the needs of those living with mental illness and to promote the overall mental health for all. I'm committed to raise awareness about BIPOC Mental Health Month. I downloaded the toolkit that MHA offered on their website, and I'll share some of that on the Other Side 45's Instagram and also in my new HR role. This episode, like I said, I'm going to share my personal experience. But before I do that, let's get into the facts behind the theme, #Behind the Numbers. So, what are those numbers? So here you go. Here go the numbers. Nearly 45 million people in the U.S. identify as Black and African American, with 3.1 million identify as Black and another race. More than 7 million Black and African Americans in the U.S. are living with a mental health condition. So I brought that up because with numbers like this, it's no surprise that I've experienced some mental health struggles and that I also know of others in our community. So recently I was on a call with a friend and we were talking like we usually do, catching up. And in the middle of the conversation, they say, "How do you feel about mental health?" And I responded, "Well, mental health is health," because I actually do believe that. And I explained it. If you have a mental health issue, you need to seek help, just like you would if it were a physical issue. And they went on to explain that they were experiencing a mental health crisis at that moment and was waiting to hear from their psychiatrist and believed that they needed to be in inpatient care. Now, I'm not sure. I wasn't sure how to respond. And I don't know if I said the right things or if I was helpful. But hearing my friends share with me their mental health struggles made me think of my own struggles. I've had more than a few struggles through my life that I'm going to share just a few today. So the first one was when I'm going to share was when I was in my early teens. And I don't remember what was going on at the time. All I recall is that I had what is now known as active suicide ideation, which is when you have thoughts of suicide or self-harm and you've developed a plan to carry it out. Now, I did have a plan. Now, it wasn't a well thought out plan, but it was a plan nonetheless. So here's the plan. I was going to visit home of friends, and these were friends who were in a cult. And they had a pretty large family. Like I said, I was a teenager and they were all adults, but I knew them really well. I also knew that they had several prescriptions in the home. I didn't know what the prescriptions were for, but I knew that a family that size and knowing their history, I knew that there were going to be several bottles. So the plan was to take a few, maybe two, depending on how many were in the bottle, of course. Just take a few out of each bottle and then go home and consume them. Okay, now I said it wasn't a well thought out plan. And the reason why is because I had no idea what medication was in the home. Nor did I have the ability to Google them because there was no Google. I also didn't know how my body would react. So I just thought it would react the way I wanted it to react. So I thought, okay, if I just take one or two out of each bottle, it wouldn't be noticeable. Like, for instance, if I was going to be down there and they needed to take one of the medications while I was there, they wouldn't say, wow, 5 are missing. So it was a plan, like I said, maybe not the best plan. So I went to their house, and since we were friends, they welcomed me with open arms and they treated me as they always did. And we laughed and we talked. And, after being in their home with that kind of love, it just made me forget about why I was there. But I had already secured maybe 2 pills because on the onset of my visit, I went to the bathroom and took, I think, 2 pills out of one of the bottles that I saw that was in the bathroom. So, like I said, I was supposed to do it gradually, not to bring attention to myself. So I did walk in there ready for the plan. But then when I came and started being with the family, the plan changed and I decided not to do it. And I didn't share this with anyone for years. Side note, now I did share this story with the leaders of the cult during my ousting meeting. And I remember one of them telling me that I was a thief because I stole the pills. Anyway, back to the story. So I don't remember the time frame from when I had those thoughts and that plan to this story I'm about to tell you. I don't remember the time frame, but anywho. So there was some news of a teenager who committed suicide in the cult, but they were in a neighboring congregation, not in the same city that I was in. But this kind of information, this kind of thing has a way of making its way all over the place. I mean, it was a tragedy, so everybody knew, everybody was talking about it. Now, because of my experience and what I had wanted to do, I was like really interested in what happened and how. Now, I never found out the details. Maybe I did, and I just don't remember. I have a horrible memory. But anyway, let me tell you what I do recall. What I do recall is how Mother reacted. She said, now, why would he do that? Now his parents must face everyone in the congregation. How embarrassing. I'll never forget that. She was concerned about the embarrassment of his parents and the questions that those in the congregation would ask. And I remember her saying that, oh, how horrible that was, and she would never want to live that. There was no discussion or concern over this young man's mental health, why he felt that ending his life was the only option. The only thing she cared about was how embarrassed his parents must be. Now, this affected me, honey, because I was afraid of bringing that kind of embarrassment to Mother. That when I tell you that was a major concern for me, that was a major concern for me. And I vowed I wouldn't do it while I was living in her home. Now, I'm not going to say that her response was due to the cult belief system. This was a generational family belief. The cult, like many other faith-based institutions, encouraged help through their spiritual leaders. Now, to be clear, my stance, faith and spirituality can help aid in healing and be a valuable part of a treatment plan. My family, like a lot of Black families, didn't or don't support seeing a mental health professional. Black and African American communities generally hold a strong stigma against mental health challenges and seeking help. According to the research, yes, I did the research. Many Black people, especially men, believe that mild depression or anxiety would be considered crazy in their social circles, inappropriate to discuss even among family, and a sign of personal weakness. That's how they feel. So, this is why my friend that I mentioned earlier asked me how I felt about mental health. They too had experienced backlash when sharing with loved ones that they were struggling with their mental health. They were told that they were using that as an excuse to run away and not to go to work. Like I said, I've never shared my mental health struggles with family, so I haven't personally experienced this type of reaction, but I've witnessed this type of reaction and I've seen the fear in my family. We had a family member who had major childhood and adult trauma. That person sought mental health and was called crazy. And I've had family members, not unlike my friend, who felt that if they listened to the advice of their doctor, who recommended they seek mental health treatment, that others would find out and they would be labeled unstable. Now, I haven't had an active suicide ideation since the one that I told you about, but I have had a passive suicide ideation. So, what that means is you have thoughts of self-harm or thoughts of suicide, but you don't have a plan to carry it out. So I've thought about it. I just never really had a plan. I don't come up with plans. September is Suicide Prevention Month. Now I may share on my podcast an experience that I have had when I shared with an associate that I had passive suicide ideation. Now, it wasn't called that back then, but I shared that with an associate and it did not go well. I'm not sure if I am ready to share that story, but in September we shall see. So, anyway, back to the story. So, fast forward some years beyond my teenage years, because I was a young mother. This was during either amid the divorce or shortly thereafter. I was visiting family back home in South Carolina. The car was, and this was the day we were going to leave. It's the last day of the visit. The car was packed. We were ready to go. And it was raining. I don't know exactly what the issue was with the car, but when we got in the car to leave or went outside to go to the car to leave, we couldn't. But it was something very, very simple. I don't want to say very simple. It was something easy to fix. Like, I don't remember if we went outside and saw that the tire was flat or tried to crank up the car and the battery was there. But all I remember is that it was a simple fix because we did eventually leave that day. But that one thing, that it was just too much. It was just too much for me. Now, I had on this red, ugly dress. It wasn't red. It was like burgundy, and it had these big white, I want to say magnolia flowers on them. I never did like this dress, but anyway, because we were driving and I was going to be in the car for at minimum 3 hours, I wanted to wear something comfortable, so I put on this ugly dress. So here I am, standing in the rain in this ugly dress, getting drenched. Okay? If you don't know me, I'm going to tell you something about me. I do not like wearing wet clothes. Even when I go swimming, as soon as I am out of that water and I'm able to take off that wet swimsuit, I do. But that day, standing in that rain, in that ugly dress, I couldn't. I just couldn't. I couldn't move. I couldn't process. I just couldn't. That one little wrinkle in my day it just made me to a point where I just couldn't move. I just stood there in the rain getting wet. Now, the dress was long. It hung just above my ankles, and it was made of heavier material. So when the rain hit the dress was heavy and uncomfortable. I hated it. But at that moment, I didn't care. I didn't say a word. I didn't move. It was, like I said, it was raining pretty hard because I remember, um, although I parked in the driveway, which is cemented, right at the end of the driveway is sand that leads into my mother's backyard. And the rain was coming down pretty hard. And I don't remember if I was wearing shoes or sandals, but as the rain hit the sand would pop onto my feet, and my feet had um, sand on them. I didn't like that either. But at that moment, because I just couldn't, I just allowed it to happen. So I heard the door open, and I think I could see out of the side eye. I don't, maybe I turned around, but I saw mother, or I just knew mother was there. And she just stood there watching me. I don't know how long she was standing there, but she didn't say a word. Then I heard her walk back into the house and close the door. Now, I don't know how long I stood out there in the rain. I just know that eventually, of course, I walked back in the house, changing the dry clothes, and then I began preparing for our departure. Mother nor I mentioned what happened. And I think about this day from time to time. Now, I haven't just stood in the rain, not being able to continue, but I felt this way many times. I felt like I just couldn't. All right, last experience I'm going to share today. It's from 2020. Yep, 2020. All right. The thing about 2020 is that I was coming off several months of major life changes. So here we go, timeline. November 2018, just days before, or maybe a week before Thanksgiving. So we're talking the end of November. I had a stroke. Yep. April 2019, end of April. We had a fire in our condo, which was, the fire was on a Friday, and I believe I was supposed to do my daughter's college reveal party either that next day, which was Saturday, or that Sunday. I'm pretty sure it was that Sunday. I could have looked it up. It's not quite that important. So we had a fire. So that also meant we were left homeless. Now, to add insult to injury, my siblings had called my daughters at different times. Both siblings called. Each sibling called one of my daughters and told the girls that I was lying about the fire and that we had to move. So one sibling told my oldest daughter that she has had problems with a fire before, and she's never had to move because it was a fire on the stove. So she told her that I was lying and that was not the reason why we had to move. My other sibling called my youngest daughter saying similar things, but she said, "Your mom's lying. That's not why you guys have to move." Now, neither one of them bothered to come over to the condo to see the damage. What's interesting is, side note, is that I took pictures of the condo because I knew they wouldn't believe me. And I remember after that, because I was tempted to send them the pictures, and I said, "What are you doing? Why do you have to prove to them that you had a fire that was so bad, the damage was so bad because it was water damage, that you have to move?" I had to really stop myself and say, "What, girl? What? Why? You don't have to prove anything to them." Anyway, that's just a side note. But anyway, so they didn't believe. So I'm going through that with my girls, and they're both really upset about the conversations they had with their aunts. Anywho, we had to leave. The fire chief told us And we stayed with a coworker for a week, and then we moved into an extended stay motel. May 2019, the day before my oldest daughter graduated from high school, I was laid off from my job. So, y'all want to recap real quick? We're living in a motel. I am now without a job. And you gonna hear more? Yep, here we go. I had just I had just secured our new place and we were scheduled to move in June, but here I am without a job to play for said place. So I didn't know how we were going to afford this new place, which was $250 more than our previous home. Oh my gosh, I think about 2019. I do not know how we survived. And I do wonder to this day how it really affected my daughters. Because you know what? They refused to talk about it. Even back then, because they were still in high school, I went to the school and they had some free counseling that they offered the girls, but they refused. They wouldn't go. But I saw the effects of what happened in their demeanor. But they both put on a brave face like their mother. Honey, we were stressed. Now, I won't say they were depressed because that's not a place. That's not my place. But I was. So here we go. Summer of 2019, I put on my super mom cape and a smile for my children. Because in that fall, I had one who was entering college and I was supposed to be happy. And I wanted her to be happy and I wanted to celebrate that. My youngest was entering her senior year in high school and I wanted her to have the best senior year. I just wanted both girls to have a great year. So the summer of 2019, honey, I was so stressed and depressed. There were days I barely got off the couch. Honey, there were days I didn't get off the couch. We lost a lot in that fire, and a friend of mine had given me a bed, but I refused to sleep on the bed. I just slept on the couch. And I knew I had to somehow muscle through it because my daughters deserved more than our reality. And I celebrated both of their milestones, but was struggling inside. I had to put their happiness first, and I did the best I could. But honey, then 2020. And I was hearing, like most of us, were hearing reports of this virus that was spreading in the world, and cases were increasing in Georgia. So one day, while my youngest was in school, my oldest was off to college, I went to see a therapist. I remember I was so nervous waiting in the waiting room because I wasn't sure if I could speak because it was so much going on. And then I wasn't sure what to share. But you know what? I knew I needed help. And after that appointment, COVID started shutting things down in the city, which included my therapist. So here we are in 2022. So as you can see, it's been a challenging year, 3 years for my family. But today, I look for ways to combat my stress. I try to look on the bright side to help heal. I look for ways to help heal. I encourage my daughters to do the same. I encourage them to seek therapy. So yeah, I believe mental health is health. And I support everyone getting the help that they need. Well, these are just some examples and stories of my mental health struggles because, honey, there are many. I want to raise awareness, and that's why I shared my story. So, hashtag beyond the numbers. You now know beyond that, and those numbers I gave you earlier is a story of a real person who struggled. So, sharing my struggle is just one of the ways that I hope that I am trying to break the family cycle of not seeking help and trying to remove the stigma of actually getting the help. And here it is out there for strangers to hear. I'm okay with that though, because like the great Mary J. Blige says in the theme song for My Life Just Fine, I like what I see when I'm looking at me, when I'm walking past the mirror. Don't stress through the night. At a time of my life, ain't worried about if you feel it. Got my head on straight. I got my vibe right. I ain't gonna let you kill it. You see, I wouldn't change my life. My life's just fine. So meet me on the other side of 45's podcast, website, and Instagram. New episodes will be released every Monday. Thank you for tuning in. And please rate the podcast 5 stars on Apple Podcasts so others can find it. It helps me grow my podcast. Your feedback and support are appreciated. Now, the next episode is from my Gen X versus Z series. Our Gen X rep, my daughter Bougie Canvas, and I will discuss colleges. Now, this was a very hard episode because we're talking about mental health. So this next episode is going to be fun. It's going to be lighthearted. So if you know some Gen Zs, encourage them to listen to my series. I hope you're enjoying the series as well. Until next time, good mental health to you.